Before we start with our special class about icons and holy images, worship, veneration, and idolatry, I'd like to test you. Okay? Who is this? It's me, of course. And what is it? A picture. Exactly. This is the theme of today's class. I took the first picture that I found on the internet on our website, so I printed it out just to point out that this is how we approach our icons. We do not say that they are gods. We do not say that they are little gods. We say that they're representation. And if you show to your children when they're very little, right, who's this? And they will tell, that's my daddy, right? If you were to show this to my kids when they were little, they would tell right away. And then if you ask them, so where is your daddy, here or there, right? They would point out to me, right? Mm-hmm. So same thing with icons. We see the representation, but the person who is represented on the icon is not this paper, is not this picture. The person is way behind it, right? The person might not be here by us, close to us, but this picture represents his closeness to me personally. And we as a family, as a big Christian family, one big Christian family, we have these icons or the pictures of the people that we call saints, those who are, we know from their life that they had become so close to God that they were able to not only to receive the grace of God fully, but to shine the grace of God through them. So that's what why we call them saints. And when you see the icons, of course, one of the first things that stand out upon entering an Orthodox church, yeah, you enter an Orthodox church and all of a sudden you see first and foremost what? The iconostasis, right? The wall of icons that divides the altar from the church. The iconostasis. And to tell you the truth, it hits many people that, oh wow, what is that? So many idols. Yeah, how come? We thought they were Christians and so many idols. And they are worshiping these idols. Of course, this kind of sayings are legit if we were to call those pictures gods. If we were to call that picture Jesus, right? We call it, this is the icon of Jesus. This is the icon of the Virgin Mary. This is the icon, or a picture in our language, right? A picture of such and such saint. But we never say that this is the saint. Well, we might say, right? Because just in the same way that we say that when we are asked who's on the picture, we say Father John, right? Who's on the picture? Jesus Christ. Who's on the picture? Jesus Christ. Who's on the picture? Virgin Mary. Who's on the picture? I don't know. Who's on the picture on this side? Joseph, right? Who's on the picture here?
A bull.
A bull. See? So if you see when you watch the video online next time, maybe tomorrow or the day after, and you see his horn behind my head, you have to know that that's his horns, right? Not mine. We, the Orthodox, believe that these icons only represent the people that are depicted on them. They are not actual people. They are not actual gods. They are not actual, like they had in the Old Testament, actual idols, right? And they understood that these idols were gods. Specifically, those idols that they had. Well, I am showing the small ones, right? Because there are some instances in the Bible when some of the very important people were running away from their father. Well, not actually running, but leaving her father behind, and she stole his gods, if you remember, right? And actually, they thought those small, wooden figurines or made out of stone or anything, they were gods, and they were referring to those specific items to help them. In our case, today we're going to see what is our teaching about iconography, about worship, about veneration, and about idolatry. So Orthodox believers bow before the icons, kiss them, and light candles in front of them. And icons are sensed by clergy and carried in procession, right? Why do we carry icons in our procession? Any thoughts?
It's a representation of the person.
It represents that that person is with us, right? Of course, icons don't have feet and they can't walk on their own, right? We have to carry them. That's why we carry them. But why we have them amongst us is that all these people, we believe strongly that all these people are waiting for us in heaven with Jesus Christ, and we are one big family, and we do not separate ourselves from them, because we do not separate ourselves from Jesus Christ. Because Jesus said, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in their midst, right? So if we are gathered together and Jesus is in our midst, who can forbid all those saint people that we call them saints to be present with us? Because church is divided into 2 parts, right? The one on earth and the one in heaven. It is very important to understand that icons have been a part of Christian prayer since the early centuries. So you might have noticed, if you read at least the life of St. Luke the Apostle, he was actually the first one. It is believed that he was the first one who made what we call now an icon of the Theotokos, of the Virgin Mary, right? He painted her image. He was the first one. And you also probably come across an icon that is called icon made without hands. It is believed that when Jesus Christ washed his face and put that towel, and that picture stayed there, right? Of course, it wasn't the picture that we have it now, the icon made without hands, that we actually made them with hands, of course. And we have, that icon has nice and clear kind of edges, and we add color to it. But when Jesus washed his face with water and kind of wiped his face with that cloth, of course, you just imagine all the dust that is there on the road, all the crowd, people that are following there and that are standing there. He's going to be crucified, and he's carrying the cross, all that sweat, and he touches the cloth. Of course, his image, full of, well, dust and sweat and blood, yeah, was depicted on this cloth. So when you see this icon made without hands, you can Google it up, and you will see nowadays it's a beautiful icon of Jesus Christ that represents his, that shows only his face, and it's usually depicted on a cloth. The icons of Christ during his earthly life, we don't have any more icons, because images were forbidden, right, altogether at that time. But sacred tradition affirms that the Orthodox Church has understood the importance of icons since the very beginning of the Church. And this understanding is rooted in the doctrine of the incarnation of the second person of the Holy Trinity, Jesus Christ. Only through the incarnation of the Son of God, it became possible to make a picture of the Son of God, but incarnate, right? So whatever we see, any icon that we see of Jesus Christ is just a picture. Did he look like we have them, like we have him on our pictures? Of course not, right? It's just a picture. It's not a photo. It's not a portrait, right? It's a representation made on, well, at that time they made it on wood, but later we now even print them. See, even on the cloth, right? It's not a problem nowadays to print an icon or print any image. The use of icons is essential to Christianity, because Christianity reveals not only the Word of God, but also the image of God. As St. John the Evangelist writes, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So since he became flesh, we can make a picture of him, right? Or his representation, or at least a hint for us that he is with us. When we look at the picture, he is with us, right? So when you see multiple icons of Jesus Christ around the church or in somebody's house, would you actually think that there are so many Christs? Of course not. Yeah, there's only one Christ, right? So that's why even this proves that Christianity never looked at the iconography as as though they were idols. Not a chance. And in the 7th and 8th century, a major heresy broke up. You know about it. Called the iconoclast heresy. And iconoclasts or icon breakers accused those who venerated icons of idolatry. Same thing is happening nowadays. Claiming that worshipping icons violated the Old Testament commandment. Sure indeed, worshipping icons violates the God's commandments. But venerating icons does not violate it. And it's a different thing. And I have a full quote from the decision of the Seventh Ecumenical Council. You know, before this split on West and East, before all the churches, Protestant churches emerged, the church was one. And they got together, and they decided, they had their business together, right? The church was conciliar, and still is. The Orthodox Church is still conciliar, is guided by the councils, not by one person. In the Old Testament, well, I'll read the quote right away from the Old Testament and from the New Testament, a little bit down. But these icon breakers, or iconoclast heresy, they wanted icons gone. And that controversy lasted for such a long time that many lives were lost due to this, controversy, because people, you know what happened after the edict of St. Constantine. Many people came into the church who were not of Christ, actually. They just were baptized for the sake of just to get some higher seat in the government or something like that, because Christianity became the religion of the state. And you could not be a governor, let's say, if you were not a Christian. So whether you believed it or not, you wanted to have the seat, of course, they went and baptized. And secretly, they kept their own traditions and their own ways of life. And later on, when they realized that they can get together because the church is conciliar, right? And they can, talk to people that feel the same way, that they can bring in the different views, but Christian views, into the church. They started doing that. And that's why church had to get together and kind of explain everything. This is the right faith. And you know, we talked about the symbol of faith, about our creed. And all this creed was developed, as you know, now on Nicene, Constantinopolitan, on two councils, Nicene Council and the Constantinopolitan Council, First and Second Ecumenical Council, 325 and 381. I underline here that at that time the church was one. There was no Protestant churches, there was no Catholic churches, there was no Orthodox by name, only by faith. So in the New Testament, we see God revealing himself by becoming human in the person of Jesus Christ, and before, God was invisible and could not be depicted. Makes sense? Of course. But when he became human, people could see him, and his image could be portrayed. And now I want to give you a quote of St. John of Damascus, one of the prominent saints. And actually, if you want to go online on my website, I have posted there a list of quotes from the Bible and from the saints, saying of the saints, right? Because for the sake of saving some time for us, you can go and read those, all the quotes, right? But here I have just a few. And these are the words of St. John of Damascus. When you contemplate God becoming man, then you may depict him clothed in human form. When the invisible one becomes visible to flesh, you may then draw his likeness. So image is his likeness. Use every kind of drawing, word, or color. That's the main thing. The representation of a saint or Jesus Christ in this case, because St. John Damascus was writing about representation of Jesus Christ in paintings. We draw, so to speak, a picture of Jesus Christ even with our words, right? We describe him, how gracious he is, how good he is, how long-suffering, and so on and so on. We kind of picture him in words too. So any service that the Orthodox Church has, we have lots of pictures in those services that represent the heroes from the Bible, heroes from the Christian history, and represent us as well. Us usually sinners, right? Who want to do what? To change their lives for better. And we are working on it. The iconoclast heresy wasn't just about rejecting icons. It was also connected to a denial of Christ's incarnation. You see, when all these people that came into church just because they wanted some power or they wanted to get some, well, profits from the government or from the state, the Gentiles, of course, if they were to believe that Jesus, the Son of God, became fully human, as we believe, right? Then they had no choice but say, well, then our gods are useless, right? Because we have true God, from true God incarnate, he became man. Well, then, of course, where are those gods? Where do they fit in? They don't fit in because we see this one, and we never saw those ones, right? But we see this one. It was also connected to a denial of Christ's incarnation, the belief that Jesus truly became human. And because these people wanted humanity or the incarnation of Christ to be removed from the church's belief, they started this iconoclast heresy. They started going against icons, understanding very clearly, if you remove icons, it's very easy to remove Christ from the religion. But we know what St. Paul the Apostle wrote, right? If Christ hasn't risen, then our faith is just empty, right? Our faith, Christianity, is based on Christ. Christ is the cornerstone of the foundation of the church. You remove him, the whole building collapses, right? And they knew it too. They weren't dumb people, of course. They understood it very clearly, and that's why they started kind of hitting on icons, because that was the easiest for them to do. Much easier to convince an ordinary, let's say, peasant that this was just as idle as we used to have before, right? Than to convince him that Jesus was never born to this earth, right? It was much easier because in churches they preached Jesus, but they never preached about icons, because icons were just the representations, that's it, pictures. And if you remember, if you go to catacombs, has anyone been to catacombs in Rome? If you go to those catacombs, you will see as early as the 2nd century, even late 1st century and early 2nd century, you will see some pictures. At that time, symbols, right? Because they had to hide. They had to hide from the authorities in those days yet. And let's say end of 1st century, beginning of the 2nd century, the 3rd century, they had to hide. And that's why they came up with this fish symbol, right? Which represents who? Jesus Christ. Yeah. It's in Greek, it's ichthys, means fish. But ichthys, Jesus Christos, Theou, I forgot what's the name, but anyway, you can look it up on internet, of course, but it means that it is the representation of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, the Son of God incarnate. So when they saw the fish, they knew, oh, this is our people, we can come here, we're going to be safe here in this environment. Nobody's going to kill us here for professing our Christian faith and having Christian prayers together. So those Christians, and in those catacombs, you can find the angels, you can find different sufferings of the first martyrs depicted on the walls. And it's very important to understand, because it came in the very beginning, from the early stages of Christianity. It's not that somebody came up with this iconography stuff later on because they wanted to make money on it. We had it from the very beginning. It's just that these iconoclast heretics, they started kind of twisting the minds of the believers that no, they are just tricking you into their religion, but actually what they mean, those are idols. That's what they do. And the church had to be, prior to the council, in different geographical areas, church had to come up with different ideas how to preserve icons, and yet how not to become the, so to speak, how not to go against the state, because at some point, even the emperor was leaning towards iconoclasts. So he was leaving the Orthodoxy and leaning towards the iconoclast. Well, you know how politics work. Well, same thing was happening at that time. So what was church doing? They started lifting the icons higher in their churches. Yeah, that's how we got our icons as high as the ceiling, right? Why we have them, the pictures even, well, not in our church because our church has a different construction, right? But in the proper Orthodox churches that are built from ground as Orthodox churches, you will see that the ceiling, or the heavens as we call it, because it represents the heaven, is all painted with holy people, including Jesus Christ, the angels, and all the saints that we know of. So they started raising icons higher. Why? Because not for the sake of the people that were coming to church and believe that icons are just a representation of God, of Jesus Christ and his saints, but for the sake of iconoclasts, because they used to run into the church, grab the icon and smash it. You know? That's why they are iconoclast icon breakers. Smash it, just break it, as though they were idols, right? So the higher, they were lifting higher and higher and higher, right? An icon, actually, isn't meant to stand between a believer and God. Icon is not standing between us. It's like a window. It opens for us the person who is depicted. It brings closer to us, like through a window. Right? If you are standing behind the wall, you don't see your neighbor, right? But if you have a window, and you look through the window, you can see your neighbor, and maybe he can see you through the window, right? And if you open the window yet, you can even talk to him. In the same way, the icons were treated in the Orthodox Church since the very beginning. So they bring those people closer to us. That's why, another point, we carry them around with us when we go for a procession. Because we kind of believe that those people would definitely be with us had they been here with us. They would definitely do the same thing with us because they were doing it while they were alive, right? So, talking about the biblical foundation. So, the Bible provides guidance on the use of images in worship, prohibiting idolatry. Same as the Orthodox Church says, we cannot worship the icons as idols. We cannot. And I'm telling you this openly, and it's no secret, of course, you know that. While allowing the creation of images for sacred purposes, which purposes I tried to explain already. They are like windows that we feel that these people are closer to us. This is just a physical representation or visible representation of invisible things that we believe that they exist, because we do believe that those people that are with God in heaven, they are just as alive for God just as we are. And they, as the Gospel of St. John says, they pass from death to life. So, here is one of the 10 commandments that we as Orthodox Christians always get when we say that, yeah, we have icons in our church. I've heard it so many times. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. Exodus 24:5, verses 4 and 5. This commandment clearly forbids the creation of all idols for worship. And if you read the Exodus, you know why and how this commandment was implemented. When Moses went up, what did people do? They collected the gold and built a golden calf, and they worshipped it. That's why this specific, they worshipped it as idol, as their idol. That's why this specific commandment was given to forbid them doing that. But see what God commands to do 5 chapters later, Exodus 25. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold. Does it contradict the previous commandment where it says, and you shall not make for yourself any likeness of anything that is in heaven above? And we know the cherubim are in heaven, right? The closest to God. One of the closest to God. But here God commands, and now I want you to make those. So is there a contradiction within God? Can God say one thing when he kind of woke up on the wrong foot, and a different thing when he woke up on the right foot? Of course not. We cannot even think about that, because God is unchangeable. So there must be something else. And something else that the Orthodox Church has always believed is that the commandment was directed strictly against the idols, not about the images in general. Because God himself tells people, create these images, and you shall make the two cherubim of gold, of hammered work. You shall make them at the two ends of the mercy seat. Make one cherub at the one end and the other cherub at the other end. You shall make the cherubim at the two ends of it of one piece with the mercy seat. There is more. If you read the book of Exodus, there is more that those images were created. And that the house of God or the temple of God or the was filled with those images. And yet nobody at that time said, well, listen, God, how does it work? You said not to create images, and now you said create images. I don't get it. They never questioned this, because they understood clearly that commandment was against the idols specifically, not about images in general. If you do not worship images, of course, what's wrong? What wrong can be with having image if you're not worshiping as God? And those people needed this commandment, because we know how many times they slid down and they went back to worshiping false gods later on already, after the Exodus, way after. Look at Solomon, what he did. Yeah? So they had to have this commandment, and yet they had to know that God is the one who created heaven and earth, and he is one true God. So they could not worship any other gods but him, and yet they had this representation of heavenly hosts in their temple as a reminder for them that this place is holy, the same way we have our icons in our church, and cherubim and seraphim painted as well. So in this passage, you see that God instructs the creation of cherubic images for the ark of the covenant, and for the later on for the temple of God. So these, of course, were these images used in their daily worship? They were, because among those images of cherubim and seraphim and other heavenly hosts that were represented there in different forms or in different images, right? That worship was done among those images. And those images were to remind them about the heavenly presence of the heavenly person here, of God himself, as a reminder. So the teaching of the church fathers added to it quite a bit and provide substantial guidance on the proper use and veneration of icons, drawing clear distinction between veneration and worship. So I am going to read pretty soon, not right now, but pretty soon I'm going to read the quote from the Seventh Ecumenical Council, the decision of the fathers of the Seventh Ecumenical Council. And I will draw your attention to two words, veneration and worship. Veneration, proskinesis in Greek. So it was written in Greek, so we know that what it means, proskinesis. Right? And worship, latria. Remember these two words, okay? Proskinesis and latria. John of Damascus, we heard of him already. I think he's the best one to deliver the theological explanation of use of icons, specifically theological. I do not worship matter, so I do not worship the wood, the paints, the whatever that picture is made of. I do not worship matter. I worship the creator of matter, who became matter for my sake, who willed to take his abode in matter, who worked out my salvation through matter. Basically, I do not worship the physical things. I worship the creator of the physical things, who became a physical thing, a man, for my sake, right? Beautiful words. So here, as you can see, John of Damascus emphasizes that the veneration of icons is not about worshiping the material image. It's not about wood. It's not about plaster that had been put on the wood prior to painting with different paint that icon or that image. And he underlines here the incarnation of God again. Saint Basil the Great, I remember this quote of Saint Basil or Saint Basil. There's different ways of pronouncing it. I like it Basil. Saint Basil the Great said, "The honor paid to the image passes to the prototype." If I were dead now and this was standing in front of my coffin, would you put flowers before this? We do. When our relatives pass away, we do. Right? We honor. Because we see not the picture, not the paper, not the wood. We see the person behind it. It's like a window. It makes that person closer to me, this image, so much. And my early years of priesthood, it was the year 1997 or 1998, I don't remember the exact year, but I was serving in the Sobor, in the cathedral back in Ukraine, one of the cathedrals, and a lady came up to me from a Protestant background, and well, of course, I am a young priest, and it's much easier to take a young priest, not experienced priest, down than to somebody that is very experienced. And she said, "Well, why do you worship idols?" I said, "Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but I don't worship idols." She said, "Well, I went to your church, it's full of idols." I said, "Well, point me to one," and I throw it out. She said, "For sure you would do that?" "Of course. If you find an idol, I'm throwing it out." So she went in and she says, "Here's the idol." "No, it's not an idol. It's a picture of Jesus Christ." "Here's the idol, the cross with crucifixion." I said, "Well, that's a cross that represents the crucifixion of Jesus Christ for me. I don't worship it. I don't say this is Jesus, right? I say this is a picture of Jesus or an icon of Jesus. I don't worship it as idols." So by the time we finished, well, she pointed to 2 or 3 more icons, and she of course saw that there was no point of pointing to the icons. I said, "Do you have a wallet on you?" "Yeah, but I am not giving any money to this church." I said, "Well, it's not about the money. It's not about the money. Do you have a picture of your loved ones?" "Sure I do." "Okay, show me the picture of your..." "Well, this is my son." I said, "Who's that? Do you want me to believe that this paper is your son?" And that's it. So I told her this quote: "The honor we pay to the image passes to the prototype, to the person that is depicted on that image. Just like you pointed to the picture and told me that this is your son, because you meant the person who was on the picture, not the picture, not the paper itself. In the same way, we have the icons in our churches. Saint Theodore the Studite, I think it's pronounced that way, or maybe different, I don't know. An image is one thing. What is depicted is another. The image is not the thing itself. It is only an image of it. Same thing, right? So I won't quote all the quotes that I have it. You can go to my website and download it. There's more to it. So here's the theological distinction or theological representation. The Orthodox Church strongly believes that and teaches that there is a clear difference between worship and veneration. So I told you those 2 terms, right? I'm going to read them. The Seventh Ecumenical Council, in the year 787, upheld the veneration of icons and issued the following declaration. And I'm going to read the full declaration. Okay, it's long like this. "We define with all certitude and accuracy," we, the people that gathered for the Seventh Ecumenical Council, and make sure you understand that the Ecumenical Council, or any council, is not only about the bishops, it's about the laity as well. There were lay delegates, there were bishops, there were priests, deacons, monks. So the entire church was represented by their own people. We define with all certitude and accuracy that just as the figure of the precious and life-giving cross, so also the venerable and holy images, as well in painting and mosaic as of other fit materials, should be set forth in the holy churches of God and on the sacred vessels and vestments. That's why you see crosses and on the priestly vestments as well, that I wear during the service. On walls and panels, in houses and by the wayside. The figure, namely, of our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, of our spotless Lady, the Mother of God, of the honorable angels, of all saints, and of all pious people, can be depicted. For by so much more frequently as they are seen in artistic representation, you see, the representation, by so much more readily are men lifted up to the memory of their prototypes and to a longing after them. So they want to be like them. And later on, if I don't forget, I will mention that very important thing. I hope I won't forget. And to these should be given due salutation and honorable reverence, proskynesis. Not indeed that true worship of faith, latria. So proskynesis, but not latria to the icons. So not worship, only veneration. Where does this veneration come from? People from the East will know that in the East, they honor their elderly people and their loved ones, right? They bow before them. They touch the hems of their clothes, their feet, right? They honor them. So this is where it comes from, because it started there. So this is the veneration. This is not worship. And it was written down specifically that we are to venerate but not worship. These are the words. And you can find these words of the Seventh Ecumenical Council on internet, and you can read it yourself, of course. Not indeed that true worship of faith which pertains alone to the divine nature only, you see? But to these, to the icons, as to the figures of the precious and life-giving cross, and to the holy gospels, and to the other sacred things, incense and lights may be offered according to the ancient pious custom. So where does this ancient pious custom come from, going with incense and censing every single person in our church? You see, when I go around with incense right around the church, I sense not only the icons, people also, because we are also who? Images of God. In the same way, they are images of the people that they represent. We give this honor, special honor. It's an old tradition, of course. The thing is that this was offered in the temple of God. Incense was offered in Jerusalem in the temple of God. Incense was offered to God. And we use incense when priest goes around and sends, well, even if he doesn't go around, even from up high, from the ambo, or from when he senses all people present in the church with incense, it means that we offer this incense to God, only to God, on our behalf, and giving honor to the images of God that are present here. Honor, not worship. But incense goes to God, offered to God. Do we need that incense to use? It's just a traditional thing, of course. It's just that tradition, of course, nowadays. But it's not that important that we can be without it. We can, if we wanted to be without incense, of course we can. But what kind of Orthodox church would we be if we were not to use the beautiful smelling incense? Yeah? For the honor which is paid to the image passes on to that which the image represents. And he who reveres the image reveres in it the subject represented. So in other words, I like the shorter shorter version of Saint Basil the Great. The honor paid to the image passes to the prototype. That's it. But the Seventh Ecumenical Council had to be kind of more specific about this proskinesis and latria. Proskinesis, veneration, just like we honor our elderly people. We kiss their hands, we kiss their, well, sometimes even bow before them. And latria, which is preserved only for God himself. So if we were to talk about worship, latria, right? Worship is due to God alone. It involves adoration, reverence, and the acknowledgement of divine sovereignty. Worship is an act of the highest honor and submission, reserved exclusively for the Holy Trinity. In Book of Revelation, chapter 22, now I, John, saw and heard these things, and when I heard and saw, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel who showed me these things. Then he said to me, see that you do not do that.
I'm so surprised so many of you here. So may God bless you all. Thank you so much.
An angel visited us.
No.
Yes, he did.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy you love this church. You enjoy us together like a family, and always feel more than welcome to our church services, and enjoy your life.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you. Sorry, Father Ivan.
No, that's okay. We love angels.
Something in the back.
Don't hide those wings, don't hide. Then he said to me, see that you do not do that, for I am your fellow servant, and of your brethren and prophets, and of those who keep the words of this book, worship God. So that's what we do. We give this. We worship God only. God, Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Right? And the rest is veneration. Nothing more, nothing less. That's how we keep it from the very beginning. And if I was successful enough to show you that even from the very early ages of Christian church, when they were still in catacombs hiding, there was representation, there were imagery. There was imagery on the walls. And those representation or those images were for the people to be edified and to remind people of the things that happened before. Now, the very important thing that I promised you to disclose. How many people do you think were literate in those days?
Very few. 1%.
Well, first century.
Very few priests. Because
Not even all priests knew how to read. Because they were to do their work, and they just memorized the scripture. They memorized many things that they knew. Not everything maybe, but some parts of the scriptures that were very important for that specific church, for that specific parish, as we would call it now, right? They would memorize those. Not even many priests knew how to read.
5% government officials maybe.
Yeah, government officials had to know, right? But most of the government officials weren't very Christian, you know. They were Christian by name later on in the 4th century, but at that time, no. So these pictures that we see on the walls of our churches, and we call them icons, were the gospel in painting, the nativity of Jesus Christ. How would a person know the story of the nativity if those 3 magi weren't painted there? If it wasn't for the baby Jesus, like here, right? Baby Jesus in that crib. How would illiterate people read and memorize and remember all this? So the church started it. As soon as they could, of course, make these pictures, they just painted it for the sake of those illiterate people who could not read. By the way, even those who could read did not have a chance to find a written, let's say, gospel at least. There was maybe a copy of some gospels, of some writings in some parishes. But even the New Testament came into existence way later. So that's how the paintings were just represented the scenes from the stories that were told by the apostles to those people. So any story that is there, you can find it in our Orthodox churches. From raising Lazarus to Jesus' birth, or I should have said it the other way around, from Jesus' birth to raising Lazarus to the resurrection of Jesus Christ himself and to his ascension into heaven. So we have it in our churches. And people who do not read Church Slavonic, right? When you come to Church Slavonic liturgy, and you see all this representation, you can see, yeah, this is the church of the gospel. Because I see the nativity, I see the crucifixion, I see everything the Bible scenes are here. One thing is needed to realize that we do not worship them, we venerate them. And that's it. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshipped, leaning on the top of his staff. If you read the letter of St. Paul to the Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 21, the translation is worshipped there, as though Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph. I am sure you know the story of Joseph, who was sold by his brothers to Egypt, right? And then he saved all his brothers. And the English translation says, and worshipped, but in the Greek original, it says, proskinesis, venerated. And the English translators translated it as worship, latria, instead of proskinesis. But the Greek New Testament is up on internet, you can go and check it. It says proskinesis there, the veneration. So he venerated God upon his staff. He gave veneration to them upon his staff, because he gave them blessing to the sons. And we heard already from the quote from the decision of the Seventh Ecumenical Council that they prescribe, so to speak, proskinesis for icons and holy images, not latria. Now we're going to talk about idolatry. Idolatry is the worship of idols or images as gods. It involves attributing divine attributes or powers to created objects. You might say, well, don't you, Father, believe that there are icons that stream myrrh and people get, well, healed even by those icons, right? And you could go and check out the icons in our church, how many golden rings some icons have as a token of appreciation for healing or for their help, right? Of course. So what's the difference here? Aren't we idol worshippers now? Huh? It involves attributing divine attributes or powers to created objects, and it is strictly forbidden in Christianity. Now what? We do not attribute it to the icon itself. And if you hear that this icon healed me, run away from that person. It's a God that heals. He is the only one that heals. His grace that He gives to us when we open up to Him. And His grace can come and help us and fill us up and heal us if it is good for our salvation. Those who make an image, all of them are useless, and their precious things shall not profit. They are their own witnesses. They neither see nor know, that they may be ashamed. Who would form a god or mold an image that profits him nothing? Book of Isaiah, chapter 44, verses 9 and 10. So again, Isaiah goes strictly against idolatry, against offering worship to those gods, against that moment when a person comes to realize that this is my God is standing in front of me. Oh, well, doesn't matter how big that idol is, right? And he offers to that specific idol this God, this gold or silver or, I don't know, fruit or whatever. So Isaiah goes strictly against these things. And as you heard, the Seventh Ecumenical Council said that we define with all certitude and accuracy that the venerable and holy images are to be exposed to view, even as the figure of the precious and life-giving cross, and so on, For the more frequently they are seen in representational art, the more those who behold them are lifted up to the memory and longing for those depicted. So see, icons and idols, this is like heaven and hell, you know, completely on the opposite sides. Icons are the representation of the saints, and we do not see them as gods. We don't say that this icon is Mary of Egypt. We don't say that this icon is Jesus Christ himself, right? We say this is the icon or a picture of Jesus Christ. This is icon of a picture of Mary of Egypt, let's say, or John the Baptist, and so on. So how are our icons used? Do you believe that icons enhance our worship?
Kind of, yes.
Yeah, I believe too. Not in the way that they do something to us, but in the way that they, well, as we read from the Seventh Ecumenical Council and from some of the saints, John of Damascus, St. Basil the Great, that it gives us the sense of understanding of the fullness of the church, heaven and earth together, with Christ in our midst. That's why when you come to venerate the cross at the end, I always say Christ is in our midst. St. John of Damascus on the Divine Images wrote, "We use images to awaken the memory and love of those depicted, helping us to direct our minds towards heavenly things." Personal devotion. Does it help us with our personal devotion? Of course it does, because you go and find an icon of some saint, any saint, right? And you read the name of the saint, and you right away want to read the life of the saint, because you want to know why this saint was, well, honored as a saint in the church. And when we read that life, we kind of, for us personally, even if we start thinking, well, I am not even close to that person, right? It helps us in our personal devotion, because all of a sudden it kind of feeds up my desire for my change. It helps me to change my life for the better. So again, we do not look at it as idol. We look at it as our friend, whose picture we have in our wallet maybe. And I already mentioned it, but I have written it down here, but I mentioned it already, that the veneration of icons fosters a sense of unity, right? That heaven and earth are gathered together. That's why we call our churches heaven on earth, because the entire heavenly kingdom is present here. That's where we can much more fully say that the kingdom of God is within us. And when we come together and we form a church, it comes out of us. And we project that kingdom in the same way the icons project the people that they represent. So all these projections of our own inner heavenly kingdom that had been planted into our hearts, we get together, and with Christ we are present in heavenly kingdom. That's what we do in church. And by looking around and seeing all those saints, it only helps us to be more devoted to our Christian faith and to serving God and to serving each other. Not just God, of course. We have to help each other as well. So the use of icons and holy images in Orthodox Christianity is deeply rooted in the theological tradition and in biblical principles. That's why the Orthodox Church has been keeping icons in our churches and the houses of the faithful. So the distinction between worship, veneration, and idolatry is crucial for understanding their proper role, the proper role of icons in our church. So this distinction was made by the Orthodox Church during the times of iconoclasm for the faithful to have full opportunity to enhance their spiritual life. Icons are not objects of worship, but are venerated as representations that lead the faithful to a deeper communion with God and saints. We believe so, and we use them for that reason. Through the teachings of the Church Fathers and the decisions of the Ecumenical Councils, the Orthodox Church affirms the significance of icons in enhancing worship, educating believers, that's what I said, gospel in painting, and enriching spiritual life. How can it enrich our spiritual life? Well, easily. I feel down, let's say. I have some kind of a problem, inner problem, spiritual problem, or maybe not even spiritual, but I'm kind of down, feeling really bad. And I come to church and I see icons around me. And well, nowadays I already more or less know who's who in the church, right? I mean the pictures in the church, the icons. And all of a sudden I see that, well, all these people that are represented here in icons, all these people went through the same thing that I am going through. They suffered a lot, even more than me. But they had their trust in God. And they went through it with God. So for me, I better pick myself up and walk and go further, closer to God. Change my life, change my attitude for the better. This understanding helps prevent the confusion between veneration and idolatry, ensuring that icons remain a means of grace and an aid to the faithful in their spiritual journey. Amen.